Well, I'm not sure about Greenbrier County actually. I'm just across the border in Monroe County, but I do have an office in Greenbrier County as well. Well, they're kind of mixed together. When we have to wear a mask and go to Walmart, we're technically in Greenbrier County at that point. I don't know. I've been in Walmart maybe once the past year. If I have to put a mask on, I'm generally not going to go unless my wife makes me. Right. That is technically voluntary. Technically. Well, I've like you, Tom. I've had it, up to here with I was done with masks from the beginning, and I've filed several lawsuits so far, and I'm really done with them now. At this point, I'm ready to sue private employers. It's none of their damn business whether or not I want to wear a medical device over my face. They have no right to restrict my breath. I don't care if they're a private company. I just don't care at this point. So I'm definitely looking into setting up some lawsuits against some of these woke corporations. And because when you trigger the ADA, it gets complicated. You have to have a smaller or a larger business. I think it requires 40 employers or more. So looking at setting up some lawsuits and hammering them over this. But also, really, mostly what I'm seeing now is complaints about vaccines being mandated by not just the government, but also private employers, and especially private employers. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this is definitely developing to be the civil rights issue of our nation's history. And I mean, I think it will surpass the civil rights movement of the 20th century. I mean, this is just Orwellian. It's fascistic. I mean, it's crazy the direction that we're headed. And these people, they will not stop unless forced. I know it. I'm glad you talked about the 10-year-old child that stood up to his bully teacher, and I saw that last night on TV, and you know what? That just really hit home to me because I've been dealing with, and you've been dealing with, these coward politicians and bureaucrats for the past 13 months who they will express privately that they don't want to wear a mask, blah 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 blah, but they don't have the courage to stand up in public and say that, or they don't have the courage to say that to the public. And it takes a 10-year-old child to do that because he's not worried about his career or getting canceled. He's not worried about what consequences might come for speaking the truth. And you know what? That is the type of spirit that our country was founded on. People who risk their lives, their fortunes to chase freedom. Well, here's what I think. Where's the attorney general? Isn't this the sort of stuff that the attorney general is supposed to do to protect us? These corporations, and that was really part of fascism in the 1930s. Italy and Germany is, that's sort of what separated it from communism. Is you did have this private industry, and it was sort of an arm of the government. And a big problem with civil rights law is that generally we cannot sue private companies because private companies theoretically cannot violate your civil rights because they're not the government. But we're seeing that change, and I don't even have to explain why that is, which is sad because we've all seen it. We've seen that big tech has essentially become an arm of the government. We've seen that Walmart has become an arm of the government. That people are following Walmart policies as if they're just another government agency. So we're seeing this you know this just conglomeration of government and bureaucracy and these woke private corporations, so-called private corporations that are really putting us under their boot at this point. And we're gonna have to fight back. And there's only so many lawsuits that can be filed or litigated, I mean, that's only going to do so much. And we've seen that a lot of these judges aren't going to do anything anyways. And I think you're right. It's just going to take mass non-compliance. Well, I mean, I think there's potential lawsuits in all of these situations, but really what needs to happen is the West Virginia legislature needs to find in itself the courage of a 10-year-old child and give us legislation that proactively gives us, legal rights that we can sue for, to attack these private employers. I mean, because everybody knows that even though West Virginia is generally an at-will employment state, they can fire fire their employees for really any reason. They can't fire their employees for reasons that would be discriminatory under statutory law, such as skin color or race or ethnicity, things of that nature, or even age. And there needs to be legislation to protect for other protections, such as, political affiliation, but really healthcare, choices such as this. I mean, this is just outrageous. I mean, this just illustrates the danger of allowing the medical community to get too close or, become a part of the government. And that's a lot of what happened going back to fascism in 1930s Germany. The medical community in Germany was very much involved in what was going on over there, just like the scientific community was. And we, more so than separation of church and state, we should be concerned with separation of hospital and government, or science lab and government. No, not that I'm aware of. In fact, I mean, if people go to my website, thecivilrightslawyer.com, I posted a sort of a form to whom it may concern letter that people can use, and to explain to their employers or the decision makers and organizations in West Virginia that it's against federal law at this point to mandate, whether in writing or verbally, or whether just it's a de facto situation. It's against federal law right now to mandate that employees or students or customers take a COVID-19 vaccine, because they're all under an EUA authorization, which by definition requires that it not be mandated. And I lay all this out in this letter, and it's a very well written letter because I didn't write it. It all the substance of it was provided to me by a civil rights lawyer in Kentucky, Chris Wiest, who's really been on top of this stuff. And so it's really a great letter, and it lays it all out there. And I guarantee none of these decision makers, none of these employers know this. They just do what they're told by the government, by the CDC, and they haven't read the authorizing documents, that are filed with the FDA by these drug companies. Because if they did, they would know that these documents specifically give all sorts of disclaimers and warnings about the unknown potential harms of these vaccines. And for instance, if you look at the Pfizer documents that they submitted for their EUA authorization, emergency use authorization, it specifically says in there that they have no safety information for individuals who are under the age of 18 or anyone who's immunocompromised, and such as myself. And I have an immune disorder. And so if somebody's going to tell me to go take a vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, when I look at it, it says that they can't give me any representations about, whether it could whether it could hurt me. I may be fine by taking no vaccine. I may have natural immunity. I don't know. Or I might have some kind of crazy side effect. My immune system may go crazy just for taking this vaccine. And so if I'm an employee and my employer has mandated me to take that, or my government, all right, who's liable for that? We know that the drug company, we know that Pfizer's not going to be liable for that, because they have no liability at all. So who is going to be liable? Now, as a lawyer, who I'm going to be looking to sue the employer that mandated it. And that's something they're missing here. All right, if they're just trying to cover their own rear ends by making sure that everybody's vaccinated, I think they're missing the whole point here. So if they mandated it and I have a side effect, can't I sue them? Because they have no immunity. And I think that's what we're going to see. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing, is representing some people who did have adverse side effects or maybe even died, where it can be attributed to the vaccine. If it's been mandated, boom, I'm filing suit right there. And so, I mean, that's one thing that's pointed out in this letter is, all right, we know that companies, they look at things from a liability perspective. Well, if you want to get involved in making our healthcare choices for us and mandating those healthcare choices, then you're taking on a large amount of liability here. Well, and here's the ironic thing about it is that it would be almost impossible to prove how in a court of law that how any plaintiff got COVID. So there's no possibility of a successful lawsuit anyways. For instance, just if you've never read the book A Civil Action, it's a great book. I read it when I was an undergrad, and it shows the difficulty of proving, people who got cancer from contaminated groundwater, things of that nature. This is even worse. I mean, because you could get COVID anywhere. You could have been exposed to somebody who, had violated some OSHA standard. But how do you prove causation? How do you prove that even though you were around that person, that you didn't already have it, from an exposure the day before at Walmart? You can't prove it at all. So there's no liability at all anyways, as a practical matter. But now they're creating their own liability by mandating. And even though it's against federal law, they just don't care. They don't care at this point. And I'm looking at filing a lawsuit in Greenbrier County, actually. I've been contacted by an employee who's literally, they won't put it in writing. This company will not put it in writing. But they told her to get the vaccine or leave. And so finally they've essentially put enough in writing to where I'm looking at filing a lawsuit now. So I have somebody actually being fired because of a vaccine mandate. That is not allowed under federal law. It's absolutely insane. The only other lawsuit that I'm aware of right now is the one out of New Mexico that was filed, and it was against a government entity. It had to do with jail guards, I believe. So I'm not aware of any so far that are against just purely private companies. So this may be a learn as I go type thing, but I think it needs to be done because if federal law says that it can't be mandated, then these companies need to be sued if they're going to mandate it. Or these EUAs need to be revoked. Yeah, they have immunity from suit. Now, what was I going to say? That's detailed in this letter, I believe. If you look at the letter, you know what, Tom? Here's what I was going to say. These are the drug companies that have just been in the news there in your neck of the woods for making fun of West Virginians after feeding opiates into our state. I mean, these are the same bunch of people, the same elitist snobs that don't care about us, that don't care about our health, that only care about their own liability. And really, they have none here with these vaccines. Yeah, Roundup. I mean, all this stuff. I mean, it's provided to people as products. They use them for decades, and only find out after the fact that it's going to kill them. And who know? And see, with these vaccines, you can't trust what Dr. Fauci says or what the media says, and you don't have to. Just look at the documents themselves, and the documents themselves have all sorts of disclaimers in them. FDA briefing documents for these vaccines that supported the grant of the emergency use authorization still list the following factors as unknown. Its effectiveness in certain populations at high risk of severe COVID-19, its effectiveness in the individuals previously infected with COVID-19, its effectiveness against asymptomatic infection. So it also makes clear that they have no idea about the safety of these products, including adverse reactions, adverse reactions that require longer follow-up to be detected, whether the vaccines will cause vaccine-enhanced disease. I mean, there's all sorts of... I mean, it's fine if the product is available, but people should be given the opportunity to say yes or no to it and to make an informed choice. And that's a choice that should be made between a patient and a doctor. And instead, it's being pushed just like these drug commercials you see on TV. My father is an orthopedic surgeon, and we were talking one time about, when he was starting his practice and going through his training and all that. I mean, it was unheard of. It was unheard of for drug companies to market directly to patients. I mean, there were no drug commercials, showing, the couple walking hand in hand through the garden and then throwing out side effects. I mean, that wasn't a thing. They marketed directly to the physicians who were able to make, informed decisions, hopefully, about what medicines were appropriate. But now these drug companies just market straight to the patients, going around the doctors. I mean, and when did that start happening? And that's basically what's happening here. And this should be a medical decision based on your specific circumstances, whether your age and whether you're immunocompromised or more likely to get an adverse reaction. But that's not happening. Heck, you go into a pharmacy now. They tried to give my wife a vaccine in our local pharmacy when she came in with 104 fever. And it it just makes me so angry. She went into the local medical center. She had a fever, and she had an infection. She had an bacterial infection. She needed antibiotics, and they treated her as if she had COVID just immediately. And they told her to go away and come back in 4 hours. So when she didn't have a fever, that's what they did. And you know what? She could have died because her body was at 104 fever. I mean, it needed antibiotics, and she needed them right away. And instead, because of COVID, they sent her away and told her to come back when she didn't have a fever. Now, isn't that outrageous? And so finally, they realized their mistake, that she didn't have COVID, that she had an infection. Because, I mean, who knew that all the pre-2020 medical conditions are still out there? Because people never died or got sick before 2020. And so when she went to the pharmacy to get that prescription, they tried to give her a vaccine while she still had a fever. Absolutely. And so they would have just injected her. And so how much of this is going on? This should be between doctor and patient. And it's not. So I think there's just so many civil rights issues wrapped up in one with this. It's extremely hard to follow for a civil rights lawyer, much less just regular people. And that I'm being asked questions daily that I've never heard before, and I don't know the answer to, and I only have so much time to look up the answers. But I think people need to start standing up to this stuff. I mean, it's not going to stop on its own.